reading today from the book of Zechariah, beginning at the beginning of the book. In the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah, son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo. The Lord was very angry with your forefathers. Therefore tell the people, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Return to me, declares the Lord Almighty, and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty. Do not be like your forefathers to whom the earlier prophets proclaimed. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Turn from your evil ways and your evil practices. But they would not listen or pay attention to me, declares the Lord. Where are your forefathers now? And the prophets, do they live forever? But did not my words and my decrees, which I commanded my servants, the prophets, overtake your forefathers? Then they repented and said, the Lord has done to us what our ways and practices deserved, just as he determined to do. Now, every so often when I'm watching the news or when I'm online, I'll either hear or read someone who's saying how America is a Christian nation. And there's some truth to that. We were certainly founded by a lot of Christians. Many of them who came here to practice what they believed. The Puritans, the Quakers, the Amish, the Anabaptists, the Catholics in Maryland, hundreds of sects and denominations, many of which have long since disappeared. Their adherents came here because in Europe they faced persecution. They came here to worship God in the way they wanted to, freely. And we celebrate that. Every Thanksgiving we talk about the Puritans and the Pilgrims. In school we still read about William Penn and the Quakers, and how Maryland was founded by Catholics, all the different religious groups that came here. And America has had many leaders who were Christians. George Washington always gave credit to divine providence when wonderful things happened, when he won victories over overwhelming odds. He didn't say, I've won this victory. He would say, God has granted us this victory. Lincoln, throughout the Civil War, constantly turned to God to guide him as he tried to guide the nation through its greatest crisis. Woodrow Wilson turned to God when trying to decide whether or not America should enter the First World War. And he credited God with giving him the 14 points, which he hoped would lead to a just and lasting peace. Dwight Eisenhower, like Washington, as general in World War II, believed that America's involvement in World War II was determined by God, was ordained by God, He called the campaign against Nazi Germany a great crusade. And he gave God credit for victory. When he was president, he signed the bill that added under God to the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. Jimmy Carter, perhaps the most religious president we've ever had. Now, we can argue about how good he was as a president. We can't argue about how good he is as a Christian. The work he's done since. And when he's interviewed, he doesn't speak of his time in the White House as his greatest accomplishments. He speaks about teaching Sunday school, building houses for Habitat for Humanity. He talks about the years of service. We were settled by Christians, we've had Christian leaders, and today about 2/3 of Americans call themselves Christians. Sounds like we could be a Christian nation. However, 50 years ago, it wasn't 2/3 of Americans who called themselves Christian. It was 9/10. It was 90% of Americans. They called themselves Christians 50 years ago. And we got a lot more people in this country than we had 50 years ago, which means we got a lot fewer Christians than we had 50 years ago. And of those 66% of Americans who call themselves Christian, less than half attend church once a month or more. Which raises the question, are we a Christian nation? In one way, we still are. There are still over 200 million Americans who call themselves Christians. But that means there are around 130 million Americans who don't. Now, some of them are Jewish, and some are Muslims or other religions. But the largest group of Christians who don't call themselves religion, according to our latest census, are what we call the nuns. Now, not like Catholic women who wear the habits and do good works. N-O-N-E-S. Nuns, as in when they were asked on the census what their religious preference was, they wrote down or checked the box that said none. Don't have one. Now, many of them believe in God. They just don't believe in the church. Or they don't like the church, or they've had problems with the church and have left the church. America has more Christians, or more people who claim to be Christian, living in it than any other nation on earth. We are a Christian nation. However, in terms of people living in the country who don't call themselves Christian, we have the fourth most of any country in the world. There are 130 approximately million people living in America who don't consider themselves to be Christian. China and India and Russia have more people living there who don't call themselves Christian than we do. But we're the fourth largest mission field in the world. There are more people in the United States that need to hear the gospel, that need to have Christians tell them about Jesus, than there are in almost every other country in the world, except for 3. Puts us in a funny position. We're a Christian nation, and we're not. Now we look at our history, and I didn't realize this until I went to college. When the Constitution was written and about to be ratified, preachers throughout all of the 13 original states spoke against it. For one reason. If you read the Declaration of Independence, it talks about our Creator, our divine rights coming from our Creator. If you read the Constitution, God is not mentioned. God is absent from the founding document of our government. The framing document of our government. At the time, almost every government in the world said God gave the leaders the right to govern the people. Divine right of kings. King John of England once famously said, "I did not make myself king, God made me king." And they believed it. And even though we'd thrown off the king and wanted a new form of government, most of the preachers in America said, we can't have a government where the authority doesn't come from God. So even at the beginning, we had traces of, well, we're not sure if we're a Christian nation or not. And then we got the Bill of Rights. Now, most Americans wanted us to have a national church when we founded our country. England had the Church of England, and Sweden had the Swedish Church, and countries that didn't have national churches often had fights among various religions. So it would be a good thing to have a national religion. Well, the problem is the Congregationalists in New England were sure that the national church would be Congregationalist. And the Catholics in Maryland weren't going to accept any national church that wasn't Catholic. And the Episcopalians in Virginia and the Carolinas were positive that if we had a national church, it had to be Episcopalian. You see the problem? And we had at that time, over 200 denominations of Christianity present in this country, and there was no way we were going to be able to determine which one was going to be the national church. So, in a very wise move, the founders decided, okay, there won't be a national church, and people will be free to worship however they want. But for many, that was a problem. How can we be a Christian nation if we don't have a national church? Now that's why I call this sermon my sermon, Our Christian Heritage. Because while we could argue that we were never completely a Christian nation, even from the beginning, because not everybody who came here came seeking religious freedom. Many came seeking their fortune. Many came unwillingly as convicts. convicts or slaves. They even brought Islam and Judaism and non-Christian religions to this country from the beginning. But we have a Christian heritage. The story of Christianity is interwoven with the story of American history. You can't understand American history without it. So we have Christianity as a large part of our history. And we still have Christianity as a large part of our present. But I would say not as large as we would like. And certainly not as large as we pretend. When I have preached to congregations about the need to witness to their neighbors, about the need to share the gospel with those that they know, the answer I get back the most is, everyone I know is a Christian. Well, are you sure about that? Second, are they practicing Christians, or do they just call themselves Christians? Many more people call themselves Christians than practice Christianity. If everybody who called themselves Christians came to church regularly, we would be building more churches. We would be adding on to the churches that we have. If everybody in this community who called themselves Christians went to church, any church in this area on Sunday morning, we would all of our churches would be at standing room only. We don't have enough pews in our churches for all the people in this area who call themselves Christians. Are you sure that everybody you know is a Christian? And even if they are they going to church? Zechariah reminds the people to return to God. As a nation, to return to God. Years ago, 90% of Americans called themselves Christians. 50 years ago, if you said everybody I know is a Christian, you were probably telling the truth. Now you probably just think you're telling the truth. The reason I don't like when we say we're a Christian nation is that it absolves us of responsibility. If we're a Christian nation, there's no need to evangelize. There's no need to go out and call people to the gospel. There's no need to spread the gospel here. And missionaries are people who go to India or China. Yes, we have a Christian heritage, but yes, we're also one of the largest mission fields on earth. If you still think we're a Christian nation, watch the news. This is how we had act seem like we're a Christian nation? Do the things that our government does seem like the things that Christians would do? The call for us today is the same as the call of the prophet Zechariah. Return to the Lord. At this time, we will have communion if the deacons will come forward.